So going back to the pillars of the oriented programming, encapsulation is the first one, right? So encapsulation. So going back to the concept of encapsulation, encapsulation just means you're hiding the internal details so that the external user doesn't know the internal details. So they can interact with that object, but they don't need to know about the internal details, the actual implementation. So for example, in this one, so you create the animal, right? So this is the user. So this is the user's perspective. They just see the animal. They can't see the inside of the animal. They can't see what's going on inside, right? You only show them what they need to show. So for example, in the animal example, you only give access to the move, right? So if I click on this, you can see that it only has you can only in the animal object you can execute this object, this method equals get hash code method, get type method, move method, and the toString. So these four are actually from the .NET framework, right? These are from the object, because see how it says object dot equals, right? So that is this one, because in the .NET framework every object is derived from the root object. In the .NET framework there's a root object called object, and every object derives from that object. So in the .NET framework is fully object oriented. But in this example I didn't go into that detail, but you can actually see that even in this example you can see that. See, it's got the bool object. See how it says object? So that is the root object in the .NET framework that every object derives from. And get hash code. See, it's from the object. Get type, again, it's from object. ToString, again, is from object, right? But move, it's from animal. See, it's from the animal. So that is defined in animal. So in terms of going back to the encapsulation, you can see the animal to the user. If I am the user of this animal object, I can only see move. I can only access this method, this move method. That's the only one I'm allowing the user, in this case myself, to see. So if I publish this software to the outside world, they will also have the same situation, because I'm not going to be publishing the code to them. All I'm going to be publishing is an assembly being a DLL. So I'm going to compile this program into an assembly with all this functionality, and I'm going to give them the assembly. So they will, once they put a reference to the assembly in their program, and they try to create an animal, only method they will see is move. All this other functionality they will not be able to see, or they will not be able to access or do anything with, right? So you can ask, how is that possible? How can that be? Because from this perspective, I can see all these functionalities there. Why is the user not seeing that? Because that is the beauty of object orientation. You only show what the user needs to see. So in this example, you can see that again is the animal class. So you have these keywords such as private, protected, public, private, protected, public. So so let's just break this one down into smaller pieces so that it's easy to understand. So as I mentioned before, these are fields. These are like fields. It's like a field. It's like a data container. So and the data containers can have different types. So if I hover over this, it tells me that's int32. So it's basically integer. So it can hold whole numbers, right? So this is also an integer. See how it's an integer? This is a color object. So this is a user defined. It's actually a struct, but it could also be a class, right? So it's a user defined. It's a user defined object. So this like this one. No, this is a user defined object. So you can also define your own objects. So as soon as you go public, or whatever access modifier you want to give, public, and you say class and your object name here, then that is you created a type. You created a new type, right? This type has been created by Microsoft. They created this as part of the .NET framework, and these are also types that are included in the .NET framework that you can use, and you actually build your software or your types on top of these ones. So you use these as the foundation to build your types. And so yeah, so these are basically fields. Fields are basically data containers. They don't really do much other than holding data. It's like a memory address where you store certain data. And once you store that data, you can do certain operations on that data. And not only that, you can pass data into methods. Methods are the actual functions that do the work. So these are methods. See how it says private void, method, and display info move. So these are actually methods. So void means that it doesn't return anything, right? Void means it doesn't return anything. At the moment, there's no parameters, there's no data coming into the method, but I can define some kind of data. Uh, let's say counter, for example. As an example, if I define that, then I can access that in my program. So I can just say something like this, right? So I can actually make use of this data or variable or field in my method once I define that, and any user that's calling this, they can pass in a integer value into there, right? So, but because it's a private method, they will not be able to do that, and I will go into more detail into that later. But for example, if I remove it from there, if I add it to the move, right? If I add it to here, now if I go to animal move, if I do a build, now if I okay, where's the do a rebuild? Okay, yeah, because of this one is failing, so I just have to disable this one. Yeah, because I have you referenced it here, and it's also expecting the move to have the same signature. That's why it's failing. That's not why it's not building. So if I build this now if I okay, why is this not? I had to actually restart Visual Studio because sometimes it has issues with caching objects. Sometimes you need to give it a restart. So now I did just restarted it and it's working fine. So you can see that it's you can find this change that I have made, right? So I added the counter. So now that I added it, now if I try to go move, it's asking for that value. Now if I try to build this, it won't work anymore because see, it says there's no argument provided because the animal is expecting this new variable called counter or argument. It doesn't work anymore. So I have to actually give some kind of value in here. I can't give a string value, right? If I try to build this one again, it won't work. See, it's giving a different error now. It says argument one cannot convert from string to int because, as I mentioned before, this is the int type. This is an int type, so it's expecting an int value, integer value. So I can't pass a string value, string or a text value, because it's expecting a number. So I have to give a number. So let's say number one. Now if I try to build it, it succeeds. See, there's no issues because it's expecting a number, right? So like that you can pass arguments into this method. So as I mentioned before, methods are a way of doing work, some kind of work, and you usually do the work on the data. Now the constructor is a special method, and the constructor, see how these methods have a return type. They have a return type. This has a void. The constructor is a special method. It has the same name as the class. See, the class is called animal. The constructor will also be called animal. It is a type of method, but there's no return value. And the sole purpose of the constructor is to initialize the class. So you can initialize, the data and execute methods to initialize the state of the object. So that's what the constructor is there for. And you can pass in as before. You can pass in arguments into that if you want. You can do that. So that is the constructor, and you can see that the constructor is a type public, right? So these are access specifiers. So you can specify the level of access that you want to give to the outside user. Here, this is, let's say the outside user sees this, right? They don't see the internals of this. Then you can say, you can give access, like for this field is a private field. So private means only animal class can see this field. No one else can see it. Protected means only the animal class and any deriving objects can see it. So deriving means cat and dog. They are derived. See how its dog is deriving from animal. So it can see this these protected fields, this speed and color. This cat and dog can see it. It'll also inherit those fields. Not only can it see it, it'll also inherit those fields into there. So you can access those and change the values in there. And you can see that the animal constructor, where the initialization of data happens, is a public. So anyone can access this constructor and call the constructor. So as soon as when you say animal of a new animal, what will happen is it'll call the constructor, right? That's what will happen. So if I start this program, you can actually see that. See how it says creating animal, right? So that's what it's doing. So creating animal. So if I go back to the constructor, you can see this is the animal's constructor. You can see the line creating animal. It's using the console object and the write line method, and it's giving this line to say, it's like a logging line. You're saying I'm doing this executing this command. So it's giving like some kind of feedback to the user so they know what's happening. So it's saying creating animal, and if you look at this one, see you can see the output creating animal. So what's happening here is actually it's creating the object there, right? So it's calling display info. Display info is a protected method. Method, as I mentioned before, does the work, right? So display method, all it does is it prints out speed and color, these two fields. So speed and color are these two fields. Speed is an integer field, and color is of type color. So that's all it's doing is display info. It's displaying the speed and the color. So if I go back to the output, you can see it's creating the animal. The speed is 0 and the color is empty, because those values at this stage when you call display info, they have not been initialized. But see, after that I'm setting values for speed and color, right? Afterwards I'm setting a value of 5 and a color white to those fields. Then I'm calling display info again. Then what happens is, see, it's got the 5 and the color white in there. Before that, the speed had 0. After I assigned a 5, it's got a 5 in there. Before the color was empty, then I assigned a color white, then it's got the white in there, right? So then this private field, right? This field can only be accessed by animal, right? Animal can access everything in here, but this particular field, only animal can access this field, private field. The deriving classes cat and dog, they cannot access this field. The cat and dog can access these two fields because they're protected. But the private one, only animal can access that, right? So for the private field, I'm assigning a value of 1. Then I'm calling this private method. private method can only be called by animal. No one else can call that. So animal is calling the private method from its constructor. Constructor is where the initialization occurs, and it's calling the private method from there. Calling means you invoke that method, you execute that method. So that's what calling or invoking means, right? So it's calling the method, and all it does is it writes this text private method so that we know it's that method, and it dumps this value, the private field, which we just assigned a value of 1 to, and that's all. That's the only thing that it does. So you see private method 1, that's what's happening there. See, private method, we assigned a value of 1 there, and it's dumping that value to the console. So that's quite simple. Then it says finish creating animal, which is this line here. See, so it called that method private method, then finish creating animal, right? So this is the creation of the animal object. So it starts out by saying creating animal, so that we know that it started creating an animal. Then it called display info, which is this next line. The display info, all it does is it displays the speed and the color, right? It's displaying the speed and the color. You can see the speed is 0 and the color is empty, because we have at this point, that's where we're calling it, no values have been assigned to these fields, right? But afterwards, what I'm doing is I'm assigning a value of 5. So this equal sign means you're assigning a value to these two fields, right? So I'm assigning 5 to speed, which is the integer value, and a color white to this color field. And then I'm calling display info again, which is what I did before. And this time, what happens is it prints those colors that we just assigned, 5 and the color white. Then this private field, I'm assigning a value of 1 into that, right? And then I'm saying assigning a value, that's what the equal sign means. You're assigning a value. Assign means you give a value to that, right? To that field. You give it a value. And then you call in the private method, right? As we mentioned before. And all that it does is it prints out the value in this field, right? Which we just assigned to. We assigned a value of 1 into that. So say private method 1. So what's happening here is it's concatenating that string. So private methods, that this string value to the private field value, which is a 1. So that's that there. And then what happens is, so once I finish calling the private method, right? Once that's finished, then you say console write line, and you say finish creating animal, so it dumps that text onto there. So that is the creation of the animal object, right? So going back to this example, you can see that private, as I mentioned, can only be accessed by the animal class. Protected can be accessed by the other classes, the deriving classes, the dog and cat, and the public can be accessed by anyone, right? Now you can see that in these methods, so this is the constructor, as I mentioned before. The constructor does the construction of the object, and it initializes all the values and whatever initialization is required. Then you got these two other methods. It's a private method. So this method can only be accessed by animal, right? No one else can access that. So if I go to the cat, right? If I try to access this private method, right? Private field or private method, if I try to access those values, because it's deriving from the animal, right? It's deriving from the animal. So you should say that I should be able to access those, isn't it? Because it's deriving those values. But you can't do it. See? It says animal private field is inaccessible due to its protection level. Animal private method, it's the same thing. It's saying the cat cannot access this private field or private method. It cannot access it because it's private. You can't access it. So if I go to the user, now if I try to, let's try to access those from the user's perspective. This is from the type's perspective. The type can't access that because these are private to animal, right? The cat cannot access the animal's private fields because they're private. Now, if I try to go animal and try to access the private field, for example, if I try to access that and assign a value in here, let's disable this. So if I try to build this, see, again, if I try to access the animal's private field, try to assign a value in there from the user's perspective, it says animal private field is inaccessible due to its protection level. But what if I change this to public? If I change that to public, then if I do a build again, there's no issues. See? Sometimes, yeah, see? Now the error is gone. So if I look at the error list, 0 errors because I changed this to public. So now anyone can access this. Anyone can access that. So even the cat can access that field without any issues. See? If I build it, if I go to the error list, there's no errors because I changed this to public, so anyone can access that. But if I change it back to private, now if I build it, if I go to the error list, see, can't access it. The cat can't access it, and the user can't access it. It's private, right? So it's not possible to access it. Only one who can access that is the animal. No one else can access that. So it's the same with the method. So if I try to access the private method from there, and if I try to access the private method from here, now if I try to compile it, see, it'll give the same complaint the same thing again. It says animal private method is inaccessible due to its protection level. Animal private method is inaccessible because private method is private. See, it's got the private. Now if I change this to public, now if I build that again, errors are gone. Why? Because it's public. Now anyone can access it. Here, to access that, I have to say animal.private method. In here, I don't have to do that because I'm inheriting the animal's methods, right? I'm inheriting it. So those methods will get inherited by the cat. So for example, this move will be available in the cat. The cat will have the move method. Even though you can't see the code, implicitly that this one will have that method in there. I will show that later, but that will be there. So that's a bit about encapsulation. So that's why these are marked as private, because you don't want everyone accessing these fields. Because if you have a user accessing this field, they can put any data in there and cause a crash in the program. So that's why it's kept private. You only give access to what the user needs to have. They don't need to have access to everything. So it's like a secure defensive way of coding, right? So that's the private method, right? So now if I change this back to private again, now if I try to build it again, it should give the errors. So I think I disabled the code. Yeah, see, it's inaccessible, right? So it's not able to access that method. So I have to comment out that code from the user and from the cat. So again, that's private. So this one can only be accessed by the cat class. No one else can access that.